Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie B and this channel is Debbie B. I have been binge watching American Horror Story and today's webisode is about Roanoke, which was season 6? Yeah, season 6. Oh, the things I've got to say about Roanoke. There will be spoilers because there's a massive twist halfway through the season that I can't not talk about. It's kind of split into like the first half of the season versus the second half of the season, and that twist really does it's mahoosive. It's a mahoosive twist, as I like to call it. Returning cast members from previous seasons include Kathy Bates, Sarah Paulson, Lily Rabe, Dennis O'Hare, Wes Bentley, Evan Peters, Cheyenne Jackson, yummy, Angela Bassett, Adina Porter, Lady Gaga, Leslie Jordan, Frances Conroy, Finn Wittrock, Taysa Farmiga and Robin Weigart, alongside new cast members Cuba Gooding Jr. and Andre Holland. And then you've also got Sarah Paulson reprising her role as Lana Winters from Asylum for the season finale. So yeah, just to get straight onto it, the first half of the season is my Roanoke nightmare, where you see it as almost documentary type footage. So you've got the actual people who are talking about their experience in Roanoke, and then you've got other actors portraying those characters in my Roanoke nightmare. Does that make any sense? It's basically, you know when you see like a documentary and you have the reenact bits? That's how it's presented. It's presented as like a reenactment of what happened to them while they were on Roanoke Island. Is that basically what it is? Yeah, so you've got a couple that relocate to North Carolina and their experiences in this house, and it feels a bit more nodding to kind of the haunted house type vibe, because they're being haunted by spirits of the people who were actually in Roanoke. In Roanoke? Is that the right wording? If people don't know what Roanoke is, actually, that's probably an idea to explain. Weirdly, I've actually found a family connection to Roanoke because my mum's side of the family is from Barbados. I've managed to trace my mum's side of the family to the original inhabitants of Barbados. We're on the British settlers in Barbados list, and through that I've been looking up the name Gail, which was my mum's maiden name, and I found it very interesting when I realised that there were Gaels from Barbados who were involved in the Roanoke colony. I found that absolutely fascinating. So the idea that I might actually have a family connection to it is kind of mind-boggling. As I read from Wikipedia, that old reliable source, which to be fair it is because it's like an essay and there are like sources at the bottom. The establishment of the Roanoke colony was an attempt by Sir Walter Raleigh to found the first permanent English settlement in North America. The English, led by Sir Humphrey Gilbert, has claimed St. John's, Newfoundland in 1583 as the first North American English territory, as the royal prerogative of Queen Elizabeth I. The first Roanoke colony was founded by Governor Ralph Lane in 1585 on Roanoke Island, which is now Dare County, North Carolina, United States. Following the failure of the 1585 settlement, a second colony, led by John White, landed on the same island in 1587 and set up another settlement that became known as the Lost Colony due to the subsequent unexplained disappearance of its population. I'm not going to say any more than that, because basically Roanoke, the season of American Horror Story, focuses on what happened to the Lost Colony and uses the ghosts of the Lost Colony to haunt present day people who are now living where they actually set up. So, in other words, it will be wherever I just said. Where is it now? Dare County, North Carolina. Having that history connected to it is really fascinating. It's not like it's glorifying it. It's putting out the genuine question of what happened to the Lost Colony and putting a bit of a fantasy twist on it. It is fantasy at the end, you know, nobody actually knows what happened, and so the writers of American Horror Story said, well, what if we turned it into a bit of a haunted house type situation? And yeah, as I said, I will not be able to go through this without talking about the major twist. Basically, halfway through the season, you realise that the first half of the season is explicitly a documentary within that world, and the second half of the season you come out of that documentary and it goes into kind of a found footage type thing, kind of Blair Witch Project style, and you meet the people, the actors who were playing the reenactments. So in the first half of the season, you see Kathy Bates as kind of a baddie, as part of the haunting, and then in the second half of the season, you see her as an actress who has gone way too far into her character, to the point where she's gone completely mad. And I'll admit, as I make this, I have just finished, literally last night, just finished watching Apocalypse. And you know from when I did season 3 that I love Kathy Bates. My first introduction to Kathy Bates as a kid was probably her playing Miss Hannigan in Annie, and subsequently I've seen more stuff that she's done, and I think my first proper thing where I've actually seen her with like a baddie as an adult was when I watched Misery, and I love how good she is at playing horror. She's so convincing as a crazy person. It's the same like Finn Wittrock. I think sometimes once you see somebody playing a baddie, it's really hard to not think of them as a baddie in subsequent things. Because like, I even do it when I'm watching TV programmes, and I'm just like, oh, that person played a baddie before, I bet they're the baddie now. And, you know, it's just something that you do sometimes, and you're just like, oh, I know them as a baddie, so they must be bad. It's like the fact that it's actress Marcia Gay Harden gives me the creeps, and I don't know why, but I have a feeling I've seen her as a baddie in something, and somewhere in the back of my brain it's going, she's played a baddie before, and so she was really creepy, so therefore for the rest of days you will find her really, really creepy. And yet I can't pinpoint why. It'll probably happen in the future as, you know, more memories get dumped and stuff, but there'll always be that little niggling thought in the back of my mind going, you don't like that person because they played a baddie, but you'll never remember where you saw them play it. After probably Murder House, this is probably one of the darker seasons, I think. And weirdly, having just finished watching Apocalypse, I think Apocalypse and Roanoke are kind of on a similar level when it comes to some of the gory stuff. And actually, I've realised that some of the gory stuff that happens in Roanoke did not make me feel sick, but when it happened in Apocalypse, I genuinely thought I was going to be sick. I will say there's a point in the second half of the season which involves sawing and eating a leg, which I'll admit that made me feel like I was going to be sick. I think I referred to it in one of my other videos where I was just like, yeah. Basically, when it comes to stuff like bones and hearing things being sawn off and cannibalistic things, that's the kind of stuff that makes me go, nope. But yeah, that twist in the middle just completely blindsided me because I knew nothing. I purposely avoided kind of looking stuff up about it. I have a habit when I'm watching a TV series or even a film of going onto IMDb and looking up the trivia as I'm watching it. And when it comes to TV seasons, it's so tempting to go beyond the episode you're watching to look at trivia beyond that. Whereas for Roanoke, and I think I've done it for most of the seasons of this, where to be honest, I don't think I did it for Hotel. I think I got ahead of myself with Hotel just looking up all the trivia because it was one of those ones where my mind was going, I want to know trivia, I want to know how this was done, I want to know how it's made. And for Roanoke, I limited myself to only looking at the trivia of the episode I just watched without going further ahead. So when the twist happened in the middle and you suddenly saw the actors of the reenactments and what was happening to them and how it went into kind of the found lost footage type stuff, it was just like, ugh. I didn't know what to do with myself. when the twist happened. It's just like, when you look at like the cast and how it's all split up, most of the cast have two characters that they're playing. So you've got Kathy Bates, who says that she's playing Thomasin White / the Butcher, and Agnes Mary Winstead. You've got Sarah Paulson as Shelby Miller, Audrey Tyndall and Lana Winters. You've got Cuba Gooding Jr. as Matt Miller and Dominic Banks, because you're seeing them. And also then you've also got the people who are playing, talking about this, it's complicated. So it's like you've got both Sarah Paulson and Lily Rabe playing Shelby Miller, because you've got Lily Rabe as the actual Shelby, and then you've got Sarah Paulson as Audrey Tyndall playing Shelby Miller. Then you've also got the story of Adina Porter as Lee Harris, and seeing like her relationship with her husband and her daughter, and you try to work out, well, you kind of know what happens, but I'm going to kick a little bit about that, but when everybody is accusing her of killing her husband, and when she's off looking for a child and stuff, and there's a lot of things of people going missing and trying to figure out how to get them back, and it's all connected to the Roanoke colony, because the ghosts of the Roanoke colony are affecting modern day, and that's how everybody gets haunted, basically. It's one of those things where just so much happens, and when you realise you've watched the documentary and then you go into them coming back afterwards and they're trying to get the actors who were involved in the reenactments trying to get back on board. Because you're looking at Shelby and Matt, Lily Rabe and Andre Holland, and these two, they moved out there, they stayed in this house where they witnessed the most horrible things. They share their story with the world via a documentary where you got actors recreating what happened to them. In the second half of the season, when you realise that you've essentially watched the documentary is finished, and now you're looking at everybody as kind of the real people. So when you come to that kind of halfway point with everything, yeah, it was Cheyenne Jackson who plays kind of like the guy who makes the documentary, essentially. And in the second half of the season, he goes back to the actors and says, I want to create a sequel to this documentary. And you realise that he kind of wants to manipulate things a bit. He sets up booby traps in the house because he wants to get like a genuine reaction from people. But he also doesn't think the place is actually haunted. That comes back to bite him on the arse, I'll tell you that. You've got Kathy Bates as the actress, Agnes Mary Winstead, and you realise that through her portrayal of the Butcher, she is such a method actress that she believes that she is the Butcher, and she goes completely insane believing that she is this character that she portrayed, and just seeing Kathy Bates in that role just going crazier and crazier and crazier throughout the second half of the season is just pure magic. Then you've got Sarah Paulson playing the actress Audrey Tyndall, who plays Shelby, and you realise that some of them want to go back, some of them don't. You see Cheyenne Jackson as Sydney Aaron James, kind of the documentary maker, trying to convince them to go back into the house. You realise that from the documentary side, that all the horror stuff you saw in the first half, which was just a memory of Shelby and Matt, obviously because it was a documentary, none of it actually happens as you see it. It's all the memories of the two characters looking back of their time in the house. This feels really complicated to talk about. But yeah, it's documentary style, so in the second half of the season, once you realise what's happened, you see bits of kind of like behind the scenes of them making the first half. And you see them kind of filming certain bits, you see like the outtakes and the bloopers, like where they're trying to act scared and then it's just like cut because somebody's tripped over a rock or something. And you're just like, hang on. So everything that we saw in the first half was literally just a documentary. And in a sense, even though it's a memory of what happened to the couple, none of it is real. So in the second half, when you see everybody go back into the house, you see all the booby traps that have been made to kind of make them think that it's happening, but then you realise that they're in the house at the same time of year as the couple originally were when all these spooky things happened to them. And you realise, oh, they are doing this at completely the wrong time, and they are going to be haunted by the Roanoke colony while they're in the house. So they didn't need the booby traps. They don't need all these kind of effects to make them scared, because actually everybody is fucked. And I mean everybody. When you go into the found footage and you see people coming up, and you've got, because they're all encouraged to film stuff like on their phones and cameras and things of what's happening in the house to react to all the booby traps and everything. But then you realise that as well as all the booby traps that have been set to scare the living daylights out of them, you've also got the actual haunting happening, which scares the hell out of them even more. Can you tell a lot happens? And again, I've barely scratched the surface. There is a connection to Freak Show, with Evan Peters playing Edward Philip Mott, because that's the connection to Dandy Mott, previous owner of the Roanoke farmhouse and the ancestor of Dandy and Gloria from Freak Show. It says, previously married with an heir, Edward moves to North Carolina with Guinness, his slave as well as his lover. Deep commitment to art, loving his art more than his family, and Guinness sees it to encapsulate life's beauty. He built the Roanoke farmhouse so he would live in solitude, living there for only a couple of days before the blood moon occurs. The blood moon is when the colony comes out of hiding, scared the bejesus out of everybody, and tried to kill everybody, basically. Yeah. It says, after locking his servants in the root cellar on the assumption that one or all of them destroyed his beloved art, Edward ended up being killed and sacrificed by the Roanoke colonists. In 2015, which is the modern day part, acting on his desire to maintain as much solitude as he can, Edward's ghost helps Shelby, Matt and Flora escape the house. And then you've got the other character, played by Evan Peters, which is the actor that plays Edward, Rory Monaghan. And in the present day, he has a relationship with Audrey. So again, they're putting, because I think they did it in Freak Show, where they put Evan Peters and, her name's gone out of my head. There's so much to think about and so much stuff to remember. Sarah Paulson. How could I forget? Sarah Paulson is British in the second half of the season. And the accent was brilliant. And having just come off watching Apocalypse, where she plays a bajillion characters. I mean, she's already a versatile actress, I'll admit that. But you just realise just how versatile she is when you get to a season where she plays so many characters. I mean, in this season she only plays 2. But there's so many seasons where she plays multiple characters throughout it. And all I could think of when I was watching Apocalypse, I'll probably go into this more, was how does not anybody come up and say, you know what, you look a lot like this other person. Especially when you've got the same characters meeting all the different characters that are played by the same people. So it's just like, because obviously I haven't watched 1984 yet, and I haven't watched, what's the new one, is it Double Feature? Because I think both of those are on Disney Plus now, so I'm going from watching everything on Netflix to going over to Disney Plus for the next 2 seasons, which I find it bizarre to say that American Horror Story is on Disney, but to be fair, it's an expansion of Disney, so it's not Disney. Roanoke had lots of gore, and there were a couple of points when I felt like I was like, I'm going to throw up, because some of this is truly disgusting. It's interesting to see kind of how they interpret what we don't know about Roanoke. I mean, there are so many examples of things where we don't really know what happened, where people turn on each other and for survival they become cannibals. And so this is such a bizarre thing to talk about, but it goes down that route with Roanoke. And they go into the idea of they must have been so desperate, and the fact that we don't know what happened to them, and they just essentially disappeared, to the point where they're just like, well, they must have come to the point when they ran out of food. So what's the only logical thing here? That they ate animals and each other. And that's part of the reason why we have no idea what happened to them. This is me kind of thinking what the writers were thinking, not saying that's what actually happened, just the idea of is it logical to think this way? And I think it is logical to think that way. Again, it happens in Apocalypse. And obviously from the title, there is literally nothing left. It's going to be interesting to talk about Apocalypse. To be honest, just talking about Cult's going to be interesting as well. But to be honest, I think, now I think about it, I think Cult is up there as one of my favourite seasons, but I'll talk about that more in the next one. But yeah, to go from that documentary style at the first half and then go into the second half and realising that it was all actors and realising that they weren't actually there when everything happened, and then going into the second half of the season when they're there on the blood moon and everything goes to shit, basically, and they're completely fucked. As with usual, you know, they find a way of giving the right people their comeuppance and trying to have a happy ending for the people who were good. Obviously, not everybody gets through unscathed, but yeah, this season was so intense. But yeah, Roanoke, as usual, I feel like I said nothing and everything at the same time. I feel like I said a little bit more just because I couldn't avoid talking about the twist. So apologies to people who came here just to get an idea, but the fact is you can't talk about Roanoke without talking about the split in the middle. I can't believe I sat in American Horror Story for so long. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. As I said, the next one will be Cult. I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest in what I have to say about that. I say a lot of interest. Hi to the new subscribers, by the way. But I think just Cult is so, to be fair, and Apocalypse, they're so kind of on the nose and so relevant, those two, because of what they're about. Because obviously with Cult, it starts off with Trump being elected into office. Yeah. So there's going to be some interesting ones in that, and I don't know how I'm going to talk about that without possibly offending some people in regards to politics. I'm going to have to take a step back for that one and just talk about it as it is, because my personal political beliefs should not make its way into that video. I'll be starting 1984 soon, and as I understand it, it's a bit of an homage to the classic horror movies of the 80s. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow for another video. Happy Vlogmas, everybody. See ya.